Hey guys, it's March 1st, and you know what that means? It's time for the Return of Godzilla month, where I re-review the original 28 Godzilla movies all over again, and we're gonna kick things off with the one that started it all. Godzilla, or Gojira, came out on November 3rd, 1954 in Japan. It was directed by Ishiro and Eiji Tsuburaya, produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka, scored by Akira Ifukube, and stars Akira Takarada, Momoko Kōchi, Takashi Shimura, Akihiko Hirata, and Haruo Nakajima as Godzilla. I don't think I really need to go over the plot with this movie. It's basically a giant monster that appears off the shore of Japan, starts wreaking havoc, and mankind has to band together to try to stop it. It's a generic monster story when you get right down to it. And it's one of my favorite movies of all time. Not just because it's a monster movie and I like seeing giant monsters destroy things, but this is really one of the most impressive and, dare I say, one of the best Japanese films ever made. You guys already know I'm a big Godzilla fan, so of course I would really love this movie. But what is it about this movie that I really love? If you haven't seen my older reviews, then this is for you. But for me, the original Godzilla works because it's a movie about something. It's one of the things that I love when it comes to genre movies of any kind. Science fiction, action. If you can go above and beyond and just tell a great story and have emotional weight to it, then I'll give you extra points for that. And Godzilla definitely delivers in spades. We all know Godzilla was created to be a metaphor for the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Ishiro Honda, the film's director, actually went through the wreckage of Hiroshima after he was released as a prisoner of World War II. And I talked about this when I reviewed most of his non-Godzilla monster movies in 2016. But one of the big themes that Honda utilizes in his films, especially his science fiction films, is the theme of unity, where everyone bands together to face a common threat and pretty much show how humanity can join forces when things are at their darkest hour. And what I also love about this movie is that it's taken with a serious approach, but it never comes across as cheesy at all. It's 100% authentic, and you buy into the drama. And it's also kind of horrifying in a sense, because the film's opening sequence is based off an incident that took place in March of 1954 involving Bikini Atoll, the testing of a hydrogen bomb, and a Japanese fishing boat that just got too close to the blast, the Lucky Dragon number 5. It was one of the most infamous cases of H-bomb testings back in 1954. Basically, a Japanese fishing boat just got too close to detonation. All the crew got radiation sickness, and it continued to show that the only victims of nuclear weapons were the Japanese. So seeing this opening sequence, knowing the events of the Lucky Dragon number 5 is pretty frightening. And all the human drama is done really well. When you watch American monster movies or science fiction movies in general from the 50s, they can come across as a little cheesy, and there's nothing really valued in the drama there. The characters in those movies are pretty much plot devices just to see the monsters happen. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, but what makes Godzilla particularly special is that most of the actors in this movie are not just B-list actors like in Hollywood. They were A-list, because you have people like Takashi Shimura, who is one of the regulars of Akira Kurosawa, and he does a fantastic job as Dr. Yamane, but the two actors that really stick out to me are Momoko Kōchi as Dr. Yamane's daughter, Emiko, and Akihiko Hirata as Dr. Serizawa. These characters, along with Akira Takarada's character, Ogata, form probably the best love triangle I've ever seen in any film at all. Usually when I think of a love triangle in a movie, I think of something like Twilight or 50 Shades, where I'm just like, oh, Jesus, fuck. But here, the love triangle is more in the background. So the deal with the love triangle is that Dr. Yamane wants his daughter Emiko to marry Dr. Serizawa, but she and Ogata are pretty much lovers. And there's one point in the movie where they try to figure out how to break the news that Emiko wants to marry Ogata, not Serizawa. But when she goes over to Serizawa's place to basically tell him, Serizawa shows his horrifying discovery of the oxygen destroyer, and he trusts Emiko to keep this invention a secret from everyone, or else it could end up being a worse weapon than the atomic bomb, which Emiko really does. But after Godzilla's attack through Tokyo, and she sees all the people that are dead or dying, she can't stand by it anymore. She has to break the news of the oxygen destroyer to Ogata, and watching this sequence is actually really heartbreaking. Momoko Kōchi does a fantastic job just selling you on the heartbreak that Emiko has to go through. And the tragedy of Dr. Serizawa is pretty heavy as well, because he admittedly decides to use the oxygen destroyer after she tells Ogata, but he destroys all of his lab notes, and he basically sacrifices himself to make sure the oxygen destroyer is never used again and that nobody can get his formula, because he's the only one who made it in his laboratory in his basement. So there's no way in hell anyone else would ever find the formula or even attempt to recreate the oxygen destroyer. We'll get into that in movie 22, but for now we're sticking with Godzilla. So it's a very impressive love triangle. Again, it's more based on the sideline, but whenever it has to come up, it's played into the story on how to stop Godzilla. And speaking of the monster himself, I don't think he needs an introduction. If you've been on my channel long enough, you know I've reviewed most of the other Godzilla stuff. I've even done mini reviews of the original 28. Godzilla is just really one of the most iconic movie monsters ever made. Obviously, the effect of Godzilla throughout his first 50 years is done by a man in a suit. The person behind the suit is Haruo Nakajima, who has long been a stuntman for Toho. He's appeared in Ishiro Honda's The Eagle of the Pacific and Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, so he's definitely done a lot of work for Toho. And by the time he took on the role of Godzilla, it's probably his most daunting assignment, because this was something that was never attempted in Japan. Eiji Tsuburaya, the film's special effects director, was inspired by King Kong, as many other directors were, and he did want to use stop motion originally, but the time restraints and the budgets that he was allowed would not allow him to do stop motion animation, so he decided to do a guy in a suit. And nobody really knew what to do back then. Eiji Tsuburaya was the top special effects director in Japan, and even to this day, I don't think anyone has matched him in terms of Japanese special effects. But to make the Godzilla suit was a tough task, even once they finally figured out that he was going to be a dinosaur. The material that was used to make the Godzilla suit was so stiff that once Haruo Nakajima started acting as Godzilla, he took about 3 steps and then collapsed. And then throughout a lot of the movie and all the future movies that would follow in Haruo Nakajima's career, he would suffer burns, he would get electrocuted, he would drown at points, he'd get blown up in certain areas, and in the instance of Mothra vs. Godzilla, the Godzilla head caught on fire. So Haruo Nakajima really went through a lot of shit when playing this role, but he never once complained about it. He toughed it out, and it really makes him a professional. And out of all the suit actors who have played Godzilla, he is the best one. He passed away last year, but when you watch him in these movies and just how dedicated he is and tough he is when he plays these monster roles, you can really respect the man. Godzilla himself is terrifying at points, and a lot of it has to do with the gritty cinematography. Obviously, it's filmed in black and white, but the black and white look just adds to the film's dark and bleak atmosphere, along with the score by Akira Ifukube, who is my favorite Japanese composer out there. And I rank him up there with John Williams as one of the great film composers, because similar to John Williams, Akira Ifukube has created the most memorable movie themes I can think of. Granted, they're all themes that have appeared throughout the Godzilla series, but you still remember them. And later on, he would definitely find his voice. But with the first Godzilla, it's very dark, and it's, again, very atmospheric. It lends itself to the film's gritty atmosphere. I could go on talking about this movie forever, but I know I have 27 more Godzilla movies to review, so I'll just wrap things up here, at least with the 1954 version. The 1954 Godzilla is one of the movies that's closest to me saying it's my favorite movie of all time. There's so many other movies that I adore that I could watch over and over again, and the original 1954 Godzilla is one of those. So yeah, get off your ass and go see it right now if you haven't. This does everything that I love in a movie. It's a genre film, it has giant monsters, it has really neat special effects, but it also has human drama, great filmmaking in general, fantastic performances, and it can get very emotional. It's just got everything that I love in a movie. And for my money, no monster movie in Japan or America has even come close to topping what this movie has done. Now, when it comes to this movie in America, we didn't actually get the original Japanese version until 2004, 50 years later. What we got instead was a heavily re-edited version, Godzilla King of the Monsters. It came out 2 years after the original in 1956 and added new scenes with Raymond Burr, who plays a news reporter, Steve Martin, who happens to stop by in Tokyo just as all the shit's going down. Now, when I originally reviewed all these Godzilla movies, I said that Godzilla King of the Monsters was good but not great. It's a good monster movie by itself, it's definitely effective, and it's definitely respectful to the original source material, but because it was heavily re-edited to appeal more to an American audience, it really loses the touch of the original Japanese version. It loses the reason why that movie is a masterpiece. So I haven't rewatched King of the Monsters from beginning to end, and rewatching it from beginning to end in prep for this review, it definitely does not hold up. It's not to say the movie's bad, because I do like the idea of Raymond Burr's character, because it's a movie for American audiences. It's neat to retell this story from an American point of view, and I think it's cool that they don't translate every bit of Japanese dialogue from the original. What I mean is they don't dub it, they don't subtitle it, and in those instances, Raymond Burr has an interpreter next to him to basically translate everything that's going on, and in a way, it makes the movie feel a little more authentic. Unfortunately, there are sequences that are not dubbed over or subtitled, and it results in some of the film's more haunting scenes to get lost in translation. The most famous scene that gets lost in translation is the mother who's holding her 2 children during Godzilla's rampage in Tokyo. Because when you watch King of the Monsters, with no subtitles or no dub, you automatically think like, oh, she's praying for God to save her or something. But when you watch the Japanese version with the subtitles, you realize that she's telling her 2 kids, we'll see your daddy soon. She's willing to accept death. And you're just like, holy fucking shit, that's dark. I grew up with Godzilla, and for a long time I grew up with this version of the first movie, and I saw the original 1954 Godzilla over at the New Beverly here in LA, and it was like watching this movie for the first time. When that sequence popped up and I actually saw what the mother was saying, I was frightened. It left me in a state of depression at how dark this movie is. But that's the original film's nature. Oh, and also because Raymond Burr is more of a central focus, the drama involving the love triangle is really not that effective. And because betrayal of Dr. Serizawa is not really that deep, because she's revealing it to both Steve Martin and Ogata in the middle of the hospital circle, and she doesn't take Ogata to a private area. And Serizawa's sacrifice is not really emphasized the way it is in the Japanese version. So unfortunately, a lot of the human drama in this movie is just gone out the window. But that being said, it's still entertaining in its own right. It does keep the haunting Akira Ifukube score, which some American versions of Godzilla movies later on would not do. We'll get to that ship when we get to it. And it's still very respectful to its source material. So rewatching this again, I would say watch at your own risk. As just a generic monster movie, it works fine, but if you've seen the Japanese version, King of the Monsters just fails in comparison, and it's just not very impressive. But the original 1954 movie, one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. I can't get enough of this. If you ever bump into me, be careful when you ask me about this movie, because I could go on forever about it. That's how much I love it. And that's my review for the 1954 Godzilla and its American counterpart, Godzilla King of the Monsters. Tomorrow we're going to be taking a look at the sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, and its American version, Gigantus the Fire Monster. So until tomorrow, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you, there's only one.